Everybody have a good Halloween? Safe, sane?
Was good.
Got young kids, Brian?
Trick or treating? Yeah, I've got 3 little ones, so they were very excited, and it's finally come down a little bit, so it's been nice.
Do you go around your neighborhood, or do you go up into Morgan Ranch like a lot of Glendora?
No, we stay in our neighborhood. We just there's a lot of kids in our neighborhood, and so just getting to see them all and kind of trick or treat sidewalks and everything. So we like staying local, and I don't like driving anywhere on Halloween just because you know kids come out in black costumes.
Yeah.
Jumping out. Yeah.
Yep.
Don't like it.
It was just fun to see the kids
How about you
out
guys?
enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I hear the bell tolling for us outside my library.
All righty.
It's 7?
Do we have
Okay.
Lana?
Yeah, Lana's in.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Hi, Lana.
Hello.
Okay. Anytime you're ready, we can go ahead.
All righty. I now call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. November 2nd, 2021, City of Glendora, Planning Commission. For the audience tonight, I am the chair and serve as the presiding officer for tonight's meeting. Before we move forward, I'd like to announce that in response to executive orders issued by Governor Newsom, the city is conducting a teleconference public meeting utilizing Zoom video communications. This allows the city to continue to conduct essential business and comply with public health administration recommendations to protect the public and city employees, practice social distancing, and limit exposure by not allowing in-person public meeting. To ensure that the public will be able to participate, public comments can be submitted as live comments during Zoom meeting and via email at publiccomments@cityofglendora.org. Again, that's publiccomment@cityofglendora.org. Tonight, we have one public hearing on the agenda. Public comment testimony will be taken during the public comment portion of the public hearing. Madam Chair, will you please conduct a roll for us?
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I will conduct an oral roll call and request that each commissioner respond with present when their name is called. Commissioner Norwood,
Present.
Commissioner Ursetti,
Present.
Commissioner Becerra,
Present.
Vice Chair Koss,
Present.
and Chair Davis.
I am present.
All commissioners are present. Thank you.
Okay, at this point in time, I will say the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. You are free to stand up if you would like, or maintain sitting if you would like. It's the thought that counts. Alrighty. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty, this brings us to reordering of and additions to the agenda. Does anyone wish to reorder or add anything to the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing nothing, that will bring us to the public comment period portion of tonight's meeting. At this point, I would like to open the public comment period. We invite members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items listed on the agenda. Announces speakers are limited to 3 minutes, speaking once on both on and off agenda items. This is your time to speak uninterrupted. Please address your comments to me, the presiding officer. Public comments are limited to 30 minutes in total. If you would like to request to speak, select the raise hand icon in Zoom before the close of the public comment period. You will then be called on when your turn is up to speak. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we've received no request via the Zoom meeting or through the public comment email to give comment at this time.
All right, very good. Well, with that, then I will close the public comment period and bring it back to commissioner statements and reports. Do any of the commissioners have any statements or reports for us tonight? I didn't think we did. So, all right, seeing none, then we will move on to director and attorney statements. Does the director or our attorney have any statements for us tonight?
I do not have any comments tonight, no.
Nor do I.
Okay. Hearing none. Special items, there are no special items on this particular agenda that I see, so we will move to the public hearing. Okay, so public hearing, item number 2, consideration of a resolution. I will now read the resolution. Consideration of a resolution to approve a conditional use permit to allow an emergency backup generator containing hazardous materials over 55 gallons on certain property located at 333 West Dawson Avenue, assessor parcel number 8641-002-046. The applicant here is Shanine Turley. I hope I got that right. Project number PLN 21-0025. At this point in time, I would like to invite Assistant Planner Joseph Weaver to present the staff report. I now declare the public hearing open.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. As previously mentioned, this is a consideration of a resolution to approve a conditional use permit, or CUP for short, which would allow an emergency backup generator containing hazardous materials over 55 gallons on certain property located at 333 West Dawson Avenue. Next, please. So as mentioned, this is a request to approve a conditional use permit. Per the Glendora Municipal Code, a conditional use permit, or CUP, is required for uses or facilities which will house or use hazardous materials over 55 gallons. In this case, this is in the form of a backup generator, which would contain approximately 316 gallons of diesel fuel, which is what's triggering the CUP. Just for some background, this property is the site of a 150 bed senior care facility, which is currently under construction. And this generator is necessary to provide emergency power services in the event of any type of earthquake or natural disaster. And the generator will power the facility in such event. Next, please. So here we have an aerial, and this is a site. The aerial imagery is outdated since the site is now that all those structures are demoed and the site's under construction. But this aerial demonstrates where the proposed generator will be located. As you could see, it's tucked away in the northeast corner of the site, kind of near the power line there, and the Dawson parking lot to the east. But this will give you an idea on where the generator is located from an aerial perspective. Next. And here is just a simple site plan, again, showing the location of the generator. You can see it there in the corner again, and this is just superimposed over the site plan for the care facility. Next, please. And this is an image elevation of the enclosure and how the aesthetics are going to be. So this enclosure is going to be attached to a trash enclosure. So you can kind of see the stucco materials they'll be using, as well as the type of fencing. Again, the materials are designed to match the care facility that will also be on the site. So for compatibility, that it all matches. And this is just an image on the trash enclosure elevations for the generator itself. Next. And with that, planning staff recommends that the planning commission adopt a notice of exemption for this project pursuant to sections 15303 and 35061 of CEQA guidelines, and hereby grant the conditional use permit to allow the installation of emergency backup generator with storage of hazardous materials, approximately 316 gallons, on certain property located at 333 West Dawson Avenue. That concludes my staff report, and I'm available for any questions that the commission or members of the public may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. At this point, I'd like to invite the applicant, Shanine Tooley, to address the commission if she has any additional information she would like to share with us.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
Are you able to hear me? Good evening. This is Shanine Tooley, the applicant, and I'm available to answer any questions as well. We are joined by the owner, Eric Oxford, representing Clearwater Living, and our architect, Michael Flanagan, representing Architects Orange. And basically just reiterating some of the information that Joseph provided is that we are seeking approval for installation of the generator so that we can provide services for residents in the case of a power outage. And some of the types of things that would be considered essential for the residents would be things such as continuation of their food preparation, potentially residents that are receiving oxygen, general lighting as a matter of safety for residents to be able to move around inside the project, and also, bathing, being able to essentially provide all of the essential services for the residents in the event of a major power interruption. And the enclosure has been designed to attenuate sound levels, as well as the generator itself is enclosed in a sound attenuating enclosure or encasement. With that, I'm available for questions, as are the other members of our team, and we appreciate your consideration of our application.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point in time, I would like to ask if there are any public comments. Have we received any public comments, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Chair. At this point, I just want to remind anybody that might be here from the public that if you would like to make a comment, you can use the raise hand icon to give public testimony on this item at this time. As of yet, we received no requests via the email, a public comment email, or through the Zoom meeting to give public testimony.
Okay. At this point in time, I don't know if I close it and bring it back to the commission, or we just bring it back to the commission.
Yeah, there would be no need for a rebuttal at this time because there aren't any comments.
Okay, so at this point in time, let me.
Hold on one second. I think Lana wants to say something.
Yeah, keep the public hearing portion open until we're ready for a motion. And let me go ahead and ask the applicant, have you familiarized yourself with the conditions of approval in the resolution, and are you accepting of them?
Yes, we have reviewed those, and we're agreeable to the proposed conditions.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Then I would like to invite the commissioners to, if they have any remarks. So Commissioner Norwood.
Yeah, I have nothing on this particular issue. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ursetti.
None from me, thank you.
Commissioner Becerra.
I do have a question. Diesel versus solar. What was the reason why we go to diesel instead of solar these days? Just a question.
I'll try to answer. Not quite sure that I would be the best person to answer. Maybe someone from Shanine's team would like to add on, but I would assume just for the reasons of emergency power, I wouldn't quite know that solar power would be sufficient enough to power this facility in the event of emergency. But again, I'm no building inspector or anything like that, but that would be my 2 cents. I don't know what other alternatives there may be for something like this.
That's exactly right. I'm not aware of any solar-powered emergency. I mean, theoretically, you would have to have a battery farm, to provide the amount of power that would be required. It's, over 100,000 square feet.
What is the KW of this generator? Kilowatt rating? Anybody?
It is included in the generator details. Off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure, but it's something that we could probably dig up.
But it's not exceptionally important. And then I was just my last question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead of Commissioner Koss. I'll let you go next. Approximately how many hours does 316 gallons of diesel get you in terms of generating power? I guess that would be
Run
more for the applicant.
approximately 30 hours at 100% power.
Okay. And do you know off the
Based on
top of your head,
manufacturer's
do
data.
you know off the top of your head what the KW rating on that is?
I do not. I'm furiously searching for it while we're talking here. I believe it's an attachment in the packet. Which page it's on? My apologies.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's not really important. I was just trying to draw some mental comparisons between Commissioner Becerra's comment about solar with battery backup, and I'm sure there's some cost trade-offs between the standard of a diesel generator versus solar with a battery backup. But other than that, that's all I have. Vice Chair Koss, any questions?
No, not really. It seems a pretty vital thing to have. So no, I don't really have any questions.
Okay, at this point in time, I will, Lon, is this where I close the meeting and ask for a motion?
You got it. That's right.
All right.
I will make a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's say that was a motion then by Commissioner Koss and a second. Was that from Commissioner Norwood? I saw a hand up, or was that Chair Davis?
Chair Davis.
Thank you. And that's a second by Chair Davis. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Norwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Sb9,
Yes.
Commissioner Becerra,
Yes.
Vice Chair Koss,
Yes.
and Chair Davis.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Thank you.
All righty. So this brings us to the consent calendar. I request a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass the consent calendar. Or
Second.
approve.
Great. Thank you. That was a motion by Commissioner Norwood, a second by Commissioner Sb9. I'll take a roll call vote. Sorry, Commissioner Norwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Sb9,
Yes.
Commissioner Becerra,
Yes.
Vice Chair Koss,
Yes.
and Chair Davis.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Planning Commission minutes. Recommendation to affirm the following meeting minutes from
That
September.
was part of the consent calendar that's already been approved. So we're going to move on to number.
Got it. I see that. All righty, so Commissioner agenda items, we have none. Unfinished business, appears we have none. So at this point in time, I will read into the record, item number 4, a study session on SB9. And I would like to invite Senior Planner Hans Friedel to present the report on SB9. Pay attention, folks. This is a big one.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm here tonight to provide kind of a high-level overview of Senate Bill 9. First and foremost, answer any questions you may have on the law, and learn of concerns you may have, receive your feedback for staff, and hopefully we have a good discussion on it. Next slide, please. Okay, so SB9 was signed into effect in September of this year, takes effect January 2022, January 1st. So cities basically had roughly 3 months to figure out how to implement this fairly significant piece of legislation. The bill's intent was to increase residential production and density in California to help alleviate the state's housing crisis. And to that end, it's part of a whole slew of state level initiatives to achieve more housing in the state. SB9, taken together with the ADU law from previous years, substantially alters, some would say even ends, single family zoning in California. So this is just another one of those series of state initiatives. So what is SB9? Oh, next slide, please. So what is SB9 exactly? At its core, staff thinks of SB9 as primarily a lot split bill that allows homeowners in single family zones to A, subdivide their lot into 2 lots, and B, have 2 dwelling units on each lot. These units can be attached or detached. So where you have 1 lot today, you can potentially have 4 residential dwelling units in the future. For this reason, some people are calling this a duplex or even a 4-plex law, depending on how you conceptualize or think about it. Importantly, these SB9 applications are by right per state mandate and must be approved by the city ministerially or administratively without public hearings. These lot splits and new residential units are subject to criteria, limitations, and objective standards set forth by the state, and some regulatory discretion is left up to the local agencies in terms of crafting local objective design standards for these SB9 lot splits and units. Next slide, please. So cities are allowed to impose some limitations with respect to SB9 applications. Cities can prohibit them in historic districts, for example, or for historic designated sites. Cities can generally prohibit them in very high fire risk zones and high fire risk zones unless sufficient mitigation measures are made. Cities can prohibit them in certain other environmentally sensitive areas such as floodplains, seismic fault zones, etc. Cities also have to require owners under penalty of perjury to sign an affidavit that they intend to occupy one of the SB9 units for 3 years. So that's another sort of limit on these applications. And then, finally, I'll mention that SB9 units are limited to residential uses. So these aren't, they can't split up a lot and have a brewery in the backyard or something like that. These are residential only uses. Next slide, please. There are some tenant and affordable housing protections within the bill. Houses cannot be demolished if occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years, or deed restricted, affordable, or even otherwise rent controlled. In those cases, only 25% of an exterior wall, which is basically, you think of a house like a box would be 1 wall, could be demolished, so an extra unit could be added. Next slide, please. So under SB9, as I mentioned, a homeowner can predominantly do two things: split their lot into two lots and have up to 2 residential units on those 2 lots for, again, a total of 4, or not split their lot and have an extra SB9 unit, so you have 2, and then also have an ADU or a JADU, a junior accessory dwelling unit, which is within the unit, under the current ADU law for, again, a total of 4 units. So kind of either way you slice it or don't, the total is 4 units for SB9 invocations. If they split their lot, again, they can only have a total of 4 units on 2 lots, not 2 units and 2 ADUs and 2 units and 2 ADUs. Next slide, please. So in terms of what local agencies, cities can do in denial, local agencies, cities are really limited in the denial of eligible SB9 applications. And by eligible, I mean that are not in one of those places that we can prohibit them, like a historic district or, floodplain or something. Cities really can only prohibit or deny an eligible application if the building official finds that the project would have a specific adverse impact that can't be mitigated. And so this is a pretty, I'd say, a very high burden of proof for the city in terms of denying an SB9 application. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to briefly go through a few tables that outline some things we can control and require, just some of the sort of standards as prescribed by the state. So this first table, it talks about residential lot splits and then the SB9 units themselves. So in terms of that first part, the lot splits, which is dividing one lot into 2, there are some state standards, and they allow local jurisdictions to enforce some of these other things. And so the first one is that the lot split itself has to be roughly proportionate. So that is, the smallest lot can't be less than 40% of the total original lot. So another way to think about that in terms of like a ratio would be the ratio can't exceed 60-40 split. So lots again are going to be roughly equal in size, but could be shaped irregularly or differently. The minimum lot size, as prescribed by the state, can't be less than 1,200 square feet. So we can't require one, to be greater than 1,200 square feet. We don't have too many lots in Glendora where, that would mean you would have a lot somewhere around 2,500 square feet to start with, which is pretty small. So we don't anticipate having many where we have a lot so small as 1,200 square feet, given that 60-40 split requirement. The new lots have to have access to a street, but importantly, they don't have to front a street. So, and I'm going to show some graphics in a minute here that will illustrate this a little better. So they have to, maybe through an easement, have access to the street. Existing conformities are allowed. So in a lot of things with planning, if the existing house or structure is non-conforming, that it was built prior to our current zoning standards within setbacks, things like that, you wouldn't have to allow additional applications or expansion of that use. That's not the case with SB9. The state basically says, hey, you have to approve these regardless of existing nonconformities of the house or site. And also jurisdictions can't require offsite improvements with these subdivisions like with other ones, so limited in that. In terms of the units, the residential units themselves, again, up to 2 per lot. The minimum size has to be at least 800 square feet. So jurisdiction, the city can't say, we limit these to 500 square foot units like a JADU or something like that. That's sort of our minimum threshold. We also can't have greater side or rear setbacks than 4 feet with the new SB9 units. But we can require 1 parking space per SB9 unit, which is different than the current ADU law. Next slide, please. Okay, so this next table basically compares and contrasts SB9 units, contrasts SB9 units with current ADU law units. It has a lot of information, so in the interest of time, I won't go through everything. We can refer back to this if we need to, and I'll highlight a few similarities and I think differences. So both ADU and SB9 units can be attached or detached. We can limit both to 800 square feet. Currently, we allow an ADU to be up to 1,000 square feet, and maybe in the interest of consistency, we'd want to do that with SB9 units as well. They both have to meet side and rear setbacks of no more than 4 feet. We currently allow 3 foot side and rear setbacks for ADUs. We might want to consider keeping that consistent as well. Both the ADU law and SB9 units have to meet the minimum front yard setbacks. So I have to correct the table here. Though most likely SB9 units as well as ADUs would be in the back, rear or side yard. If a house was set way far back on a deep lot, you could theoretically have an ADU for sure in front of that house, granted it still met that front setback. We might consider that with SB9 units as well. We can have objective design standards, architectural standards for both ADUs and SB9 units. And again, as I mentioned, one difference is in parking. We can require one off-street parking space per SB9 unit, which we can't do for ADUs. One caveat being with that is if the SB9 unit is within a half mile of a major transit station that's operational, like when the Gold Line station becomes operational, we can't require parking for them like the ADUs. There's some other things in the law to that effect about major transit corridors and park and ride locations. Next slide, please. Okay, so these next few slides represent 3 SB9 scenarios to illustrate one possible way we could administer these applications. And I hope they're also sort of illustrative of just the concept of SB9 and what it can allow potentially as well. This sort of means of administering SB9 applications is something staff's been discussing, and we'll look for your feedback, but it would essentially be to allow one primary full-size residential unit on each SB9 parcel and one secondary SB9 unit, which we would treat like an ADU under the current code. The full size would meet the current standards of the zoning to the greatest extent possible. So the primary house, and we could require the secondary unit to architecturally match the primary unit. We do think this approach may best preserve neighborhood character as opposed to a scenario where you might have standalone lots with essentially 2 tiny houses on them, 2 800 square foot houses, which we certainly could do and limit, but that might have an impact on existing neighborhood character to have larger houses with in between them, 2 very small houses. So at least in this way, the primary house would look more like a regular house to the neighborhood. So in these scenarios, we all show a rectangular lot with an existing house. This isn't drawn to scale, it's just some quick graphics. So scenario 1, we have an existing house roughly in the front center of the lot, meeting a front setback, and it has a garage for 2 cars. Next slide, please. You should animate. Okay, so here we have a lot split. They're roughly proportionate in terms of area, but it's not like split down the middle. It's kind of a flag lot for the rear lot. It does have access to the street. There are 2 parking spaces for the new SB9 lot, and there are 2 SB9 units on this lot. In this case, we've drawn it, and so I've drawn it again, not to scale, but in such a way that one could be the main unit and the other one might be the smaller unit, or is in this example. Next slide, please. Okay, so in scenario 2, this is a scenario where we have an existing house kind of off to the side of the lot. The lot's roughly split down the middle. You got access. I didn't draw the cars on this one, but we could require, again, the 2 parking spaces per side. So you can imagine that there's a garage in those houses, or they're parked in tandem out of the front setback. And then you have 2 detached SB9 units in the back for, again, a total of 4. So in the first scenario, we have 3 units. Second, we have 4, which is sort of the maximum build out of SB9, if you will. And these are all attached units in that example. And then next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And on this one, we have a little bit of a different scenario on lot 3. So we have an existing house where an existing lot where basically it's that example I was sort of referring to earlier, where the rear lot has now been carved off into a separate lot. It doesn't have any frontage to the street, but there is an access to the street through an easement, which we can require. So we can't require the frontage, but the access we can. In this case, I've drawn it so that all of the SB9 units are attached units. So in this case, you basically would have 2 duplexes on 2 lots. And again, we can require the parking for both lots. Next slide, please. And we can come back to this stuff in the discussion if we want to look at these graphics some more for purposes of explanation. All right, this is a 4th scenario, and I wanted to show this one. This is that no lot split scenario as we understand it. In this case, we have an existing house. We have a detached garage. Next slide, please. So in this case, there's no splitting of the lots. And so what we have here is we have an SB9 unit in the backyard. So that's the 2 SB9 units, the existing house of this unit. We have an ADU under the ADU law. And then we have a JADU or junior accessory dwelling unit that I've drawn attached, with a separate entrance to the existing house. So once again, we have a total of 4 dwelling units on one lot, where you could also have 4 if you split the lot. So same grand total basically, or bottom line. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of regulating what we can have local objective design standards so long as they don't contradict or conflict with SB9. This is, again, just a table of some basic ideas here, but we can have height or story limits. We can require them to meet the current front setbacks, which we would advocate they do. Gross floor area limits to the extent that we still have to allow 2 800 square foot units. We could prohibit things like exterior stairways if we allowed 2-story units potentially. We could have other architectural design elements like requiring the roof pitch to match that of the primary house or the other unit if we went that way. And then other ideas that you may have. Next slide, please. So our goal with the SB9, staff's goal was to really administer and regulate it as efficiently as possible while, based on our understanding, while limiting impacts and protecting neighborhood character to the maximum extent possible we can. To that effect, one of our suggestions, as I mentioned, is to consider allowing 1 primary residence on each lot that operates under the current zoning code, maybe up to 2 stories, which with approval. So you could have at least 1 traditional house on the new lot and then regulate the second SB9 unit basically under the ADU standards that we have, which are pretty, as I hopefully illustrated with the table, are pretty consistent in terms of size and setbacks and things. Since there are barely 3 months between SB9 being signed into law and taking effect, there are still some ambiguities and things that probably won't be fully settled by January. There will probably be some legal challenges to the bill, and we expect some additional clarification in the future on some things from the state and some other entities. In terms of next steps, staff will be working on policy for this and a framework, which will include, we hope, a guide that we can go over with residents at the counter, something much like our current ADU handout that we have. So staff expects to receive, in addition from your feedback from City Council. Later on, we'll likely adopt an SB9 ordinance or modify our existing code in some way or both, perhaps, to be in compliance with this legislation. So in conclusion, I know this is a lot of information to process, and I appreciate your time. My goal tonight was to provide a high-level overview and introduce you to SB9 and seek your input. We are happy to take questions on the law. We'll answer them as best as we are able. We have Lana here as well. And we look forward to hearing any major concerns you have, welcoming your feedback and discussion, and thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, something happened to my microphone there. Okay, I think at this point, this is where I want to kind of bring it back to the commissioners. What planning is looking for here is input from us. Ask some questions, offer some opinions, and then they'll take that. Real quick, Hans, and then I'm going to call on the commissioners. What's the next step? When we talked the other day, you've got to have something in place by January 1. Can you reference that for us, please?
Sure. So minimally our goal is to have a sort of a policy framework in place by January 1 that, like that question I had earlier about, do we allow a primary residence and, treat the second one as a ADU, or do we require both to be no bigger than 800 square feet? These are the kind of things we need to sort of know going into January 1st, because we've had seems like about one a day, folks coming in, at least asking questions about it. In some cases, that's not going to work for them. So that's kind of our first step, I think, is to have that policy framework, which will also be a handout that we can sort of discuss with people at the counter so that we can kind of process, because they're going to come January 1st and be able to sort of process these. I think the next step, once we get to sort of figure that out, will be to, create some sort of ordinance, an SB9 ordinance, which will sort of codify that policy framework, if you will.
Okay. Okay. With that in mind, commissioners, Commissioner Norwood, ask away, comment away.
Yeah. I guess my main question would be on the SB9 on the lot split. Are you basically selling the other lot, or could you sell it down the road, or they become two separate lots, or are they owned by the same people and future real estate acquisitions or transactions? Are they separate, or are they kind of attached? I was a little confused on that part.
Sure.
Different
So my
parts.
understanding of the law is that outside of that piece that requires the owner applicant to live there for 3 years, they could retain ownership of both lots if they wanted to and go through that process, and or likely they could sell that other piece off, which probably will be more than likely to happen. So, and frankly, I don't see anything in the legislation that would prohibit an owner from essentially splitting their lot, selling both halves, and signing some agreement that they live, they lease back a unit or something for 3 years. And, to that extent, at the end of the 3-year period, assuming they have lived there, owned one lot, there's nothing stopping them from selling both the lots at that point, or whichever one's left that they still own.
So they don't have to own the lot for 3 years. They have to occupy one of the units for 3 years.
That's my understanding of the law.
Okay. And as far as the street access goes, you got someone that has, let's say they're on a cul-de-sac where they have a pie-shaped lot. Chances are they can't get a street access, but let's say they could access it via a rear gate or something like that, or a side gate. Would that be more applicable to an ADU, or essentially you couldn't split that lot because you couldn't really get a street access unless you somehow split up the driveway or did something like that? So I get, and that's not, I guess it doesn't matter right this second. I'm just trying to get a clear view of what the law is. I think as we move forward, we'll probably get a better understanding of the specifics, but looks like the SB9 stuff is more geared for the folks that have more of a rectangular or squared off lot that would allow street access to both lots, where an ADU would be more applicable to a pie-shaped lot where it'd be thin in the front.
That's a good, observation and question. There are some lots that are going to be irregular, and it's going to be difficult for SB9 to work. I think there will probably be some lots that SB9 splits don't really work, and under because of size, the parking and access, as you mentioned, they may be better off. I think a lot of people will be better off going an ADU route for that reason, or not doing a lot split. There was one that, someone was talking to us at the counter the other day where it was kind of, as you mentioned, they had a scenario where they had, we think, access to a private alley in the back that then led to the street. And so the garage was like in the backyard, and then this house also fronted a street, in which case I think that back lot, if they were to carve that off, could probably use that private alley that way to get access to a street for parking, if they could make the other things of SB9 work. A situation where a lot was very narrow, like a triangle sort of, and the street was on a very narrow portion, and maybe the house was completely blocking it. In that case, I guess they could demolish the house if they didn't have a tenant. But if they've had a tenant, and we can require affidavits to this effect and those sorts of things, that had lived there the last 3 years or something, then they can't do that. So then in that case, it just probably doesn't work.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's all I have right now. I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around it and get a feel for it. I other questions may pop up, but I'll kind of let Commissioner Davis move forward, and if something else pops up, I'll raise my hand.
Real quick, is an alley considered street access?
I think an alley can be street access. We wouldn't consider an alley itself a street, but if the alley, and I think it depends on sort of how the alley is created, and same with if it's private, is it public, is it an access thing? In this example that I gave, the alley was an access as the house's garages were basically on it. So that's how they did currently get to the street. So the challenge in that case would be to get to the front street.
Will we have a legal definition along the line of whether an alley is a legal, is for SB9 purposes a street?
That I don't know. In terms of it, would the alley itself count as a street?
I would suggest some clarification on that.
Yeah, I don't know. We could follow up on that and try to sort of elucidate whether an alley is a street, or what the sort of gradients of access are with an alley as it relates to SB9.
I guarantee it will come up.
And I think the law says access.
Mhm.
It doesn't say access to, it just says access. So, I think that means anything that provides vehicular access to the property is the intent of the law. But that's certainly, I think you're right. There's some properties that are going to be more difficult than others to do it with.
Yeah. Okay, then we'll move on. Commissioner Ursetti.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davis. Thank you for that presentation, Hans. Quick question, can you clarify what the 3 versus the 4 foot setbacks on the side and rear? What it said in one slide that Glendora maintains 3, and that the law just requires that we maintain 4. Is that?
Sure. So the law with SB9 and with ADUs says local agencies, or cities in our case, can't require greater than a 4 foot side and rear setback for ADUs and SB9 units. In our case, with the ADU law, Glendora has allowed that to go down to 3 feet. So the same could be, so the SB9, we could make it consistent for that was kind of the suggestion, was maybe make it the same as our current ADU standards for sort of consistent application. But we could say, hey, it has to be 4 feet for SB9 units, and that would be legal in terms of side and rear setbacks.
Gotcha. And I just think that might provide a little more buffer with neighbors, obviously, if you're adding multiple units. Now, what is the current setbacks for if we're going to build just a brand new single family home? Is that 4 feet?
Yeah, that's going to vary by zoning district. So there's different single family zones. So Jeff, you might know some of the ones off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's typically for the estate zones, which are the larger lots, it's 35 feet. That's the rear setback for the main house.
Okay.
And for accessory structures, and sort of the reason we establish 3 feet for ADUs versus 4 is that accessory structures like detached garages, pool houses, guest houses, they only have to be 3 feet from the side and rear. So for consistency's sake, that's why we established 3 versus 4 feet for ADUs. And then the main house is generally 35 feet in most zones from the rear.
Okay. Thank you. And so when somebody goes in to build or try to build something like this, they're either going for the ADU pile or the SB9, right, paperwork, or both in the event that they want to build multiple structures on a house. Is that right? They're very
We go
different.
one. That's correct. They would likely go one path or the other based on what they want to do and the conditions of their lot and their situation. You know, in that one scenario I showed you, that sort of scenario 4 where they don't do a lot split, I guess in that case they could do the ADU, the SB9 unit, and then also do an ADU, so they could go for both applications at that point.
Yeah.
But they can't do that in a lot split as well.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
All righty. Commissioner Becerra. Bueller.
You're muted.
Sorry. Can this SB9 be applied to commercial lots as well?
No, the state's very clear in SB9 that it's for single-family residential lots only. So, and as it mentioned, it excludes, like, we can exclude historic districts and some other categories of single-family lots, but it does not apply to multifamily zoning, commercial zoning, you know, even mixed use or PDs or things like that, planned development zoning.
How about the ADU? Does that apply to commercial zoning in Glendora?
No.
Okay. Is there a maximum size for the SB9?
There is not, as long as it can fit and meet those other sort of setbacks and standards. So we're basically prohibited from making that maximum size less than 800 square feet. But if we wanted to allow them to have, you know, 2 full-size houses on the new lot to the extent that they can meet setbacks and parking and other sorts of, you know, floor to area ratios and standards like that, you could do that as a local jurisdiction.
Because I'm starting to think that it's sounding more and more like small lot subdivision if you start doing that. Is that something that we're considering or at all?
You know, at this point, we're seeking sort of your feedback on this. Our sort of my presentation and sort of initial concept that we were thinking, you know, again, thinking about sort of neighborhood character and those other impacts, was to allow one, kind of what you're saying, one full-size house to the extent it can meet setbacks and other things on the new on each SB9 lot, right? If you have 2. But then requiring that second SB9 unit to be treated the same as an ADU. So that would then be limited to, you know, whether we allow it up to 1,000 square feet or keep it at 800. That we're not proposing that we would have 2 full-size houses, but we could do that if that was the direction we received.
I think to kind of, if I understood Commissioner Becerra's question, she also asked, has the city, I think, generally considered a small lot subdivision? And in some cases, I would say there are a few examples where the city has created a smaller lot subdivision through our planned development ordinance, which is a separate thing from SB9. So for example, there are a few planned developments with lot sizes, let's say around 5,000 square feet, where the normal requirement for a minimum lot size is like 9,000 or 10,000 square feet. So there are some cases where we have done that in the community.
Doesn't that fly in the face of side-by-side units?
Do you mean, for example, there have been projects with units that where the property, even though they share a wall, I can think of a project off of Arrow Highway where the lots actually, they're separate lots, but the houses actually share a wall, so they're like right together. I think, is that what you're talking about?
No, one of the things that in Hans' presentation, it said, if you can't, if you own a lot, if you own two lots side by side, you can't split both of them. If I understood that slide correctly.
That's correct. Only one per SB9, one per owner.
Yes, that's correct.
So would not a subdivision technically start flying in the face, a small lot subdivision fly in the face of that caveat?
Are you suggesting, like, for example, if someone split the lot once under SB9 and then split it again?
No, I know you can't do that.
Okay.
That's so far, that's not it. But if you owned side by side lots, two 10,000 square foot lots.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so if you're saying you're suggesting that if they owned, like, if one owner owned two lots maybe next to each other in the city?
Yeah. And then they could create 4 lots out of those two 10,000 square foot lots?
Yes.
I think that legally they can do that. under SB9.
I tend to agree. I've had that conversation as well, that it's as far as we can tell, that's so far, if you were to proceed under the Subdivision Map Act first and do a regular old subdivision classic to establish a subdivision, that then you could take that classically subdivided, those classically subdivided parcels and then invoke SB9.
I agree.
Okay, that is the reason I was asking that is because then I misinterpreted one of Hans's slides. So, okay. I'm sorry to cut you off, Commissioner Becerra, please continue.
Oh, no, I was just trying to get a clear idea about this SB9 and the possibility of doing small lot subdivisions, which kind of a good idea, right? Because then it would be in keeping. So you could have like design review, even if they're small. And there's no association fees with small lot subdivision either. They're just like single family homes. Interesting. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Something to think about if we wanted to go that route and allow that to go. Anyway, just a thought.
Okay, that's write it down, planning. Okay, is there any more, Commissioner?
Yeah.
Becerra?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't know if Commissioner Becerra had finished or not.
One more question, just going back to the commercially zoned properties, because I know residential is allowed in a commercial zone. And is the state saying that it would only be allowed, the SB9 only allowed in the R zone, or would it be allowed in any residential related zone?
Do you want me to take that?
I was going to say it's pretty clear that it's single family zones to me in my interpretation of the law. So
Okay.
I've raised that question as well on some city attorney meetings, and the prevalent interpretation appears to be that it has to be an exclusively single family zoned area.
Okay. And going back to the ADU, do we allow ADUs in multifamily?
Yes.
Okay.
ADUs are allowed in multifamily zones, and the standards are slightly different than for single family zones.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Becerra. Vice Chair Koss.
Yeah, I think, as somebody else said, it's kind of a lot to take in, and obviously has some pretty big impact, I think, on zoning in our city. But I thought it was interesting because at the beginning you talked about how this is designed to address the housing shortage. And in reality, our housing shortage exists, but it's predominantly a housing shortage of affordable housing. So my question is there any kind of, I mean, yeah, you could theoretically subdivide your lot and put another house on there for a relative or whatever, but my assumption would be that most people are going to do this in terms of renting and turning a profit and those kinds of things. So I guess my question is there any type of stipulation that a certain percentage of this would need to be some type of affordable housing? Because after all, we know that that's where the problem is in our state. It's not a housing problem, it's an affordable housing problem.
Do you want me to take that?
If you like to, sure.
Yeah, sure, Lana, because I think you had.
And then you know what some other cities are doing.
Yeah, you
And
did-
that is something that I've been exploring a bit. There actually is in the statute a express allowance to require inclusionary housing. So if the city wanted to, and there's Supreme Court case law that supports this as well, if as a matter of policy, you would like staff to further explore putting a inclusionary affordable requirement as part of SB9, we completely believe that you could do that.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, if we look at some of the problems facing our city, and I mean, honestly, people say there's a housing shortage in California, but houses are going up, you know, faster than you and I can have this conversation, you know, but the problem is really affordable housing. And I think if we're going to address some of the other social problems that, you know, facing our city, homelessness, that kind of thing, I really think we have a responsibility to make at least you know, have that stipulation that a certain percentage of this be, you know, relatively, I know affordable housing is kind of a relative term, but relatively affordable housing.
Okay.
Okay. Are you finished, Vice Chair?
That's it. I just wanted to make that suggestion that we put, if we have the ability to put that condition in there, I definitely think we should explore that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, you know what? I'm very concerned about SB9 for a myriad of different reasons. Some of my very best friends are builders and developers, and I don't want to say that I don't trust builders and developers, but I look around at some of the neighborhoods in Glendora and some of these larger lots, and I can see, you know, a fourplex, 4 units going in one of these nice pristine streets, and then like a row of dominoes. One goes, well, there goes the neighborhood, so I might just as well sell mine. And the next one goes, oh, I might just as well sell mine. I'm very concerned that you know, crises that was self-inflicted by our governing body is now become is on us to fix through our removal of single-family resident zoning. I'm very, very concerned about that. One of the things I also want to mention was that anything that has an HOA, Hans and I talked about this the other day. If there's an HOA present in a development, the HOA must approve any of the lot splits. If I understood you correctly the other day, Hans?
Basically, the state law doesn't exempt or prohibit, if you will, or circumvent HOAs from prohibiting SB9 lot splits and SB9 units. So it says cities, local agencies, you know, the government, we can't do it. But if an HOA says, hey, we don't want to allow SB9 lot splits or units, they can do that.
Okay. The 3-year occupancy, and again, we talked about this the other day. I see that being mistreated horribly. I think people will pay zero attention to it in terms of staying there for 3 years. And again, we talked the other day, and correct me if I'm wrong, we really have no way of knowing whether they actually stayed there 3 years or not. Is that correct?
To the extent that we will require, as we are required, an affidavit, you know, under penalty of perjury that they intend to live there for 3 years, that sort of thing, we will require and can do that, and we absolutely will. To your question, you know, 2 years from now, they split, they don't tell us or something. We really don't have a mechanism in place to know that or follow up on that.
Yeah, so it's really an empty stipulation as far as I'm concerned. I would like to see if there's anything further we can do to enforce as many of the guidelines that have already come down that we already know exist. I think we hold them as dear as we possibly can. Anything we can do to put a little a little meat on the bone for the the 3-year occupancy, I would be in favor of. Back to the 3 years, there was also it had to have occupied in the last 3 years. What I don't understand what it means to have it occupy the last 3. Let's say somebody lived in a house the last 3 years. They can do it. What if the house, or they can't do it if they've been there 3 years? I don't understand the 3 years of having had to live in the last 3 years.
Sure, that's a tenant thing. So like if they rented a room in the house, or they had a JDU and rented it, or they just straight up rented the house to somebody in the last 3 years, then they would technically be prohibited.
So they would have to find a way to legally
from demolishing the house.
Okay, so they would have to legally move them out before they could invoke SB9.
Yeah, and that's so that the state, to the prior comments, doesn't lose what affordable or rental housing it has. That was kind of the protection.
Yeah. Do you have a feel? And if you don't, I would kind of like to get a feel from staff. How many potential lots could be in play? You had mentioned, Jeff, that a lot of Glendora can be considered urban. With that in mind, you take out fire zones, high fire zones, historic districts, commercial zones, all of that stuff. How many lots do you think, can you anticipate might be affected? And then some lots may be too small. I think we're trying to make a lot of assumptions, not knowing whether we're trying to limit, I shouldn't say limit, but address, 5 lots or 5,000 lots potentially.
The way the law was written, so if you just look exactly what the law says, it says that this is supposed to give every single family lot, in theory, in the state of California, the right to split into 2 lots. And that furthermore, with respect to a minimum lot size, while it has to be a roughly equal size, that the resulting lot, let's say if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you're going to end up with 2 5,000 square foot lots. But on the other hand, if you have, you could take a 2,500 square foot lot, which doesn't exist in the city, and the law allows you to go down to 2 1,200 square foot lots. So I guess just, imagine how many lots in the state of California are going to meet that basic criteria, and it's probably most of them.
There's, I was doing a little research before this. I think there's something like 17,000-ish single family houses in Glendora, 50,000 population.
That's a good number. I like that. Okay.
Exclude out the historic districts, some of the high fire things that we can't be mitigated, that sort of thing. We've also done, just because we've had some people at the counter asking questions. We've looked at, like Google Earth sort of aerial photos and stuff, but just kind of looked around. And I don't have an inventory of every single lot in the city and which ones might be able to do it or not, because there's things they could do, like demolish a house if somebody had it rented there. But, it seems like there's a fair amount of lots that this might work on.
Maybe it would help to kind of give I've only had one conversation with a person directly about a lot split, and it was actually today. And the property owner does not live on the property. This is an investment property. It's a roughly 11,000 square foot lot. And the property has 2 houses on it, although it's a single family zone. And so they want to, basically what they want to do is take the property and use SB9 to split it right down the middle and create two roughly 5,000 square foot lots, each and with the existing house on the property. They don't intend to build another unit beyond what the two that are there. So that's just one example. And the property could be split in such a way that, you know, both lots front on the street where it's currently located. That's one example. I don't know, Hans, do you have an example of anybody you can remember other than the person who talked to you today?
Jeff, just to clarify for them, that under that scenario, that developer would have difficulty applying for an SB9 because
They would. They asked about it, but they don't live there, so they would have to sign an affidavit saying that they intend to live there for 3 years, which, you know, might deter them from pursuing that.
Yeah.
I had a customer that Joe and I were helping today that you know, in their case, it's going to be a little harder for them. So they have about a 6,000 square foot lot. It's 50, you know, it's a smaller lot actually for Glendora. You know, 50s kind of, you know, single story house on it. The house covers, it's like right smack in the middle of the lot and sort of covers quite a bit of the lot. And they have a detached garage in the back. And so what they had drawn up was this carving off sort of the back lot, which area was only 1,800 square feet, which is still bigger than the minimum at SB9, but is nowhere near that 60-40 of a 6,000 lot. So in this case, you know, we were really struggling looking at it to figure out how they could possibly come up with, if it's 6,000 square foot lot, I don't know, 27, 26, whatever 40% is. It's actually be 2,400 square foot lot without going right through their house or something like that. So that there's an example of where maybe they could do another unit without a lot split, but it would be very difficult to accomplish the lot split and also meet the parking requirement.
And for me, I've talked to about 7 or 8 people so far over the last 2 weeks, and all but one were investors looking to do something. And once you told them the ownership requirements, they went back to looking at the ADU options or just walked away from the scenario. It's going to be very limiting for people in terms of with that requirement, but it does allow the homeowners a lot of flexibility when they live there.
Yeah, well, there again, I don't have a whole lot of faith in the occupancy verification. I really don't. Anything we can do to beef up the occupancy verification and enforce it, I'm all for, because I think that'll get taken advantage of left, right, center, north, south, east, and west. All right, well, moving on a little bit. I would also recommend you keep height consistency. I don't think we should be granting any exceptions to any of these things. I honestly think this is going to be a detriment to small town Mayberry community like Glendora. I really do with fairly large lots. I'm really concerned about SB9. So I think anything that doesn't conform, I think we need to take a really hard look at. I don't care if it's even just an architectural element, a spire or something. I think we need to have height consistency. I think we need to maintain, you know, all of our heights, our setbacks. You know, somebody comes and says, well, I want to do the lot split, but I can only get, you know, 2.975 feet setback. You know, I don't think there should be an exception for that. You either can meet it easily or you don't meet it at all. I think it's an all or nothing game here. Hans, I hate to send you, I don't want to go back to scenario 4 on your slide there. It didn't show any parking whatsoever. It showed an ADU, it showed an SB9 unit and some SB9 units in the front, but it didn't show anything about parking, no driveway, no nothing. I'm concerned that this is going to push parking out onto the streets at a time when they're asking us to buy electric vehicles. They're pushing cars out onto the street where there is no place to charge them at night. I'm concerned about that.
Let me, I'll just interject, Chair, that, you know, in that scenario 4, we could still require one off-street parking space per SB9 unit. So in that case, they would have to have 2. My artistic skills were a little limited with my drawing there and my little car models that I had copied. So we could, in that case, and I apologize for not showing that, have two cars, two off-street spaces on that one. But in the sense that there was two ADUs on that one, those don't necessarily have to have parking for them.
Okay.
And that's assuming it's not within half a mile of a major transit station and that other factor.
Yeah. Okay. And then my last question is concerns lot coverage. You split a lot. You've got duplex on one. You got a duplex on the other. Are we relaxing lot coverage percentages now?
So in effect, that's a really good question and a kind of a complicated one. So nothing we can do can limit these there from being, assuming they're eligible and they can park it and do those other things, have access to 800 square foot units. So in a scenario where, let's say they take a 8,000 square foot lot and they chop it in half, and you have two 4,000 square foot lots, and there's a 35% Florida area sort of ratio, so about a third of the lot can be covered. What is that at 4,000? That's going to be my mental math, but like roughly 1,333 square feet, right? So in that case, we would have to allow let's say 1,600 square feet, 800 units, which would be a little over the Florida area ratio, or in this case, lot coverage. We don't have to allow that to be bigger than that. So that's the minimum we have to sort of allow if they exceed lot coverage. Now, in a scenario where maybe it's a 20,000 square foot lot and they cut it into two 10,000 square foot lots, and let's say they propose, and let's say the direction we get and we allow them to have a primary house on each lot, on the second 10,000 lot, they want to put a 2,700 square foot house. Well, then I think the 35% would say, yeah, you can have another 800 square foot unit and still be under 35%. That would still meet the lot coverage. In that case, if we went that route, they could do that. What we don't have to do, though, is say that second unit has to be any bigger, or if they want to go over those 800 square foot sort of parameters, allow them to exceed lot coverage by an even greater amount, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is giving them a tremendous amount of leverage to exceed lot coverage percentages, or at least
two 800 square foot houses, basically.
Yeah.
Whatever that is on the lot.
All right. There's a lot more I could do here, but it's distressing. This thing is distressing to me, especially when we didn't create it. All right. So at this point, I would request a motion, and I'll need a second to receive and file the staff report. And then number 2, provide staff with feedback on potential objective design standards in relation to Sb9.
I have a couple more questions that came up. I had my hand up, but
yeah. I see those down there. So Elvia, will you keep track of the hands up down there? It looks like we have 4 of them.
Yes. Yeah. I think maybe if you go like down the roll, because 4 commissioners.
Okay. All right. Let's just start. Okay. Let's just start back over then. Commissioner Norwood.
okay, so forgive my moving. I got kicked out of my space. So this is a question. We're trying to rephrase this here. So if we're allowing a minimum of 800 square feet, if we split the lot, can I split my lot and sell half of it under Sb9? Can I walk into the planning commission and say I want to split my lot and not build anything, or do I have to develop the property if I split it?
That's an interesting question, and I'm happy to hear Lana's take on that. We've kind of kicked that around a little bit in the sense that, like, okay, you split a lot, and let's say you carve off your backyard and you have all the access, it's eligible, all that other stuff. You know, do we have to require you to build anything before you sell it? And does it matter really in the sense, because whatever would be built there hypothetically would still have to meet the standards we have? I don't know that. I don't know, honestly. I mean, as far as I take it sort of at face value, it seems like we could allow that.
So if I split my lot and say I'm going to split it under SB9, then whoever bought it from me would have to build it under the standards under SB9, as opposed to, let's say, a vacant lot under Glendora's ordinance.
That is correct. So with SB9 lots, one of the things is local agencies are required to sort of track these. So it'll have to be in like the file for the lot. And there might be some deed restrictions too that we could require. But at any rate, SB9 lots are ineligible from being split again. I didn't mention that, into more SB9 lots. So, you know, just kind of going down the rabbit hole. But yes, so when that new lot is, in this case, expanded or developed, or they build the units or second unit or something, it would have to meet SB9 standards.
Okay.
That we have, whatever we have.
And the SB9, they must have on-site parking, not street parking, as like where ADUs are not required to have parking. But the ADU, it's under one lot. It's under the same ownership.
That is correct. The city doesn't have to require, we're not proposing this, but the way it's written, it doesn't, the local agencies don't have to require off-street parking for the SB9 units, but the law allows them to. So we were proposing that we would require the one space per unit.
So, okay, I'm get that straight then. So the state allows off-street parking or requires on-site parking?
The state allows you as a city to require on-street parking. The state doesn't care if they park.
But you keep saying on-street parking. That's the part I'm getting confused.
Off-street.
Off-street.
So
okay.
the state says you can require off-street parking, like on the property. But you could basically not have a regulation for that and allow them to park on the street. The state doesn't weigh in on that.
Okay.
Which we're not proposing. We're not proposing that.
All right. And then I guess my final question is, if the lots are split, I know there's a minimum of 800 square feet to build on, and I know our ADUs, is our ADUs a max of 1,000 square feet to build, or is that the minimum? Refresh my memory.
That's the maximum.
Maximum.
Okay, so if we can we limit the maximum amount of square footage then? If I have a 12,000 square foot lot and I split it 6,000 a piece, there's only 1,000 square foot maximum on the second one, or do I have the right to build it the same size of my house next door if it's 3,000 square feet?
So the local, so we could limit it to 2 800 square foot units, and that's it under SB9.
On the second lot, or
on
just
the second lot? That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, 2 800 square feet. So I'm sorry. I disagree with Commissioner Davis a little bit. I don't see the doom and gloom in this as much as he does, because I do not believe that a majority of the people, the residential sites in the city, could ever get to where they want to do with this SB9, barring scraping their house and subdividing their lots. Now there's parts in the city, yeah, it could impact, but I would venture to say that a majority of the lots in the city are just not going to meet the standards of SB9, as you guys are seeing already as people come in and start exploring it. I'm not saying that there's not lots in the city that it will impact and it might adversely impact it, but I'm just not seeing this coming out as the doom and gloom is what it appears to be right now. I could be wrong, but that's my statement on it. And so the process now, or you're taking this input and are going to develop try to develop a policy to present to us here in the next meeting or two?
I think that's our intent, yes, to sort of gather what we can here and propose a SB9 policy for the city. And then we certainly can bring that back and, here's our draft and get your feedback on that with some more specific standards and things like that.
Where I will agree with Commissioner Davis on this is that we hold them to the letter of the law. There is no variables or variances whatsoever on this SB9, and we just follow the letter of the law so that we keep ourselves out of any legal predicament, so that the city's not spending money on something for denying something that the state says it's legally acceptable. And I also agree that we should make it as for the sake of staff and the folks in the planning department is equivalent to the ADUs as possible. I like to see them as closely aligned so that there's what do we ADU SB9 size of it? 200 square feet on a split is between 800 with the minimum the state allows. We on the ADUs we went ahead to 1,000. If we want to take the ADUs back down to 800 and go with the SB9 at 800, I'm all for that too. I would just prefer them for the sake of staff to make them as equitable and as possible and hold anyone that wants to invoke an SB9 to the letter of the law. I'm done with that. I'll relinquish any more to the fellow commissioners.
Okay, I can't see who has their hand up, Elvia. So, Madam Clerk.
So yeah, just go down the row. So I think Commissioner Ursetti's next.
Commissioner Ursetti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davis. I would just like to have more, if we're going to have more information and policy review for something that addresses this. I agree with Paulette that we do need to look at what affordable options we can make, and if SB9 addresses that. I'd be very hesitant to use it as obviously I'm sure cities will use it to deter people and make it a blanket, but if there's some options of incentives for people that want to make it do affordable housing with their SB9, I think that would be great. But yeah, so just more information on that if we could get it. And that is it from me.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Becerra.
Thank you. Is there a way that we can impose a minimum landscape policy on the SB9?
I think in the sense that we can have objective standards that, as long as they don't limit the ability for at least 2 800 square foot units. So if there was like a minimum open space or common area requirement or something like that, I think we could do that.
I'm just, okay.
One other thing to note is that the state law for water efficiency landscaping is usually triggered at 5,000 square feet. And so if there's going to be new development happening on these lots, that new development might trigger that as well.
Okay. But can we impose that so that when someone comes in and says that they want to do an SB9, it would be part of the application? They would have to submit their landscape plan at the same time?
I think so.
Okay, I'd like to see that. That's it for me.
Okay, Commissioner Koss.
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with the chair that this, could potentially be somewhat detrimental to the city in terms of, the way of life that we're used to in terms of our kind of the character of our neighborhoods. I definitely think as I said, we need the affordable housing part of it. And I thought it was interesting that Commissioner Becerra brought up the landscaping, because I was thinking of that as well. Having some kind of provision for, some type of landscaping And I do think, I agree that we need to really hold people to the letter of this, because this is already, and I'm thinking back to when we did our planning commission meeting about the size of ADUs, and we decided to limit them to 1,000 square feet. And now I'm kind of glad we did that, because otherwise we'd have these giant ADUs as well. So I think I would like to see staff just kind of make a plan that's as easy to enforce, that we're very stringent on following whatever those guidelines are. And just, I agree. This is something that obviously we don't have control over, because we're being told that we have to do this, but I think we need to do as much as we can to protect the character of our city that makes it so unique. That's it for me.
Okay, I don't think, the only other hands I see up there, they haven't taken their hands down. There we go. All right, so there are no more hands up that I can see. So at this point, I will request a motion to receive and file the staff report. And then number 2, provide staff with feedback, which we've done on potential objective design standards in relation to Sb9. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Of course.
Second?
Second. By
Okay,
Brian
thank
Rossetti.
you. Yeah, that is a motion by Commissioner Koss, Vice Chair Koss, and a second by Commissioner Rossetti. I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Norwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Rossetti,
Yes.
Commissioner Becerra,
Yes.
Vice Chair Koss,
Yes.
and Chair Davis.
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. Thank you.
All righty. So that brings us to the entertainment portion of tonight's show, the adjournment. So unless there's anything for the good of the order, do any of the commissioners have anything for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, staff, anybody have anything for the good of the order before we close it out?
Nope.
All right, hearing nothing. Everybody have a great week, and we will talk soon. Have a good night. Meeting
Thank you.
adjourned at 8:31 p.m.